Welcome to the CTOX podcast. This is the place to be if you're a technology leader navigating the fractional CTO landscape. I'm Marisa Brassfield, joined by Lior Weinstein, the visionary behind CTOX.
Here, we cut through the noise to deliver actionable insights for CTOs at every stage, whether you're looking at your first five-figure client or actively building systems to scale.
That's right. You'll learn principles, not just tactics, to transform your technical expertise into a thriving fractional practice. Let's dig in. Welcome back to another episode of the CTOX podcast. Today, Lior and I will be discussing practical sales tactics. Most sales advice is all mindset, but this isn't. If you're a fractional CTO who's tired of hearing, "we'll think about it," or "we'll let you know," this episode will give you real tactical ways to close the deal. Hello, Lior.
Hello, Marisa. Thank you for having me. Great seeing you.
I miss being in the studio in person with you, but, our respective studios will have to do for today. So we're going to focus most of this episode on tactics, but we can't drop into tactics without discussing nuance. So I'd love to start out here. How do you kick off a conversation with a CEO who has expressed interest in working together? And how do you use those first few minutes especially to build rapport and either accelerate or deepen trust?
Depends on the context. In many cases, if I meet them in person somehow, so in maybe an entrepreneur group or a conference, an event, dinner or something like that, usually the conversation kind of starts with, them asking me for my name. Then usually it's like, where is that from? Because it's a unique name. So that's useful also to just kind of spark a conversation. And they ask me what I do. And then I try to give a very high level, intro. So if technology is my context when I'm speaking to them, because I also deal with marketing and sales, is I say I'm a fractional CTO for companies, usually $20 to $100 million in revenue. And I help them grow, with technology on a part-time basis as opposed to full-time basis if they kind of skew on what's the word fractional, something like that. But then I quickly try to turn around back to them as soon as I can, because I know that's too high level and it's hard for people to understand what it is if it's new. So I try to push for discovery as soon as I can. Now, in our sales process, we teach this conversation. We call it the what and why conversation. I kind of, for CTOs to say this is a recursive function. You're going to ask what, you're going to ask why, and you're going to alternate and oscillate between the two until you basically learn enough about them so you can contextualize your pitch. So I do that on a micro, so think of like a pocket kind of conversation. So I literally ask them, what do you do? And most people do one thing. I don't do one thing. So that's always like a problematic conversation. But they usually start saying, oh, I'm a CEO of a company that does custom inflatables, or a steel manufacturing company, or an IT company, whatever it is. I'm like, cool, what's the name of the company? And again, it's a what. And then I start asking stuff like, how long have you been running this company? Or how big are you guys, in sales and revenue, whatever it is. So I try to get as much frame about the company as possible. So the name, the industry, what they do, how big they are in employees and in revenue if I can. So I try to push for that as much as I can. And then I start asking, do you have technology? Do you use, do you have a CTO, something like that? Now, in most cases, by the time they, share some stuff about them, I can already contextualize it to something. So I'm trying to build rapport as soon as possible. And the way to build rapport is you want to give them a sense of familiarity. So maybe they give me the name of the company or the industry, and because I know a lot of companies and I know a lot of industries, then I usually manage to say, oh, you're like so-and-so. If I manage to do that accurately, then it builds instant rapport because now they think I get it, which I do, like in most cases. Or it actually helps me because I say something like that, and they're like, "Well, no, we're actually different in this way." I'm like, "Great!" So it becomes a clarifying question as opposed to just a trust building question. So as soon as I get a sense of what it is, I try to give them value as soon as possible. So I'm like asking for stuff. If they're a consumer company, and do you have an app? And they're like, oh, no, we've always wanted one, or yes, but it sucks, or yes, it's great, whatever that is. If I ask if they have technology, ask them how big is the technology team. If they have a CTO, how long has he been there or she been there? And I try to get a sense of what's their disposition on technology. Is it exciting? Is it frustrating? Is it challenging? Do they find it expensive? Do they find it slow? And usually within a few minutes of conversation, I manage to do that, and then I can start talking about what would I do. Now, what I don't do, or rather the way I give them a sense of what I do, is not by words. It's not just saying, well, as a CTO, it's really just like a full-time CTO, but the reality is companies like you, don't need someone like me full-time, because if you only have enter X amount of employees in technology, right? 5, 10, 30, that's really the constraint of the business, meaning it's not ideas. We can think about a lot of ideas very quickly, especially now in the AI space. Even without me, any business can think about a lot of ideas. But the actual constraint for production, for making things real and making things valuable, are the people that do the work. And for someone like me, it just makes no sense to just sit around and wait for 30 people to do their job. Certainly sit around and wait for 5 people to do their job. So there's like a financial benefit. You can tap into somebody with like 20 plus years of experience and all of my lessons and none of my scars, and be able to guide them to where they need to actually be productive to get the business results. Now, the business results I usually get from that discovery, because I ask them, how big are you? And like, how much are you growing? Are you trying to sell the company? Yes or not? And then usually somewhere in the conversation, I already know, is this a legacy company? If they've been around for 60 years and this is like 4th generation? Or is this a startup? They started 5 years ago. So once I'm able to talk about some of the value that I can give, I always contextualize it back, to where they are, to the size, to the growth, to the pains. If they said he's frustrated or slow, or maybe they had a hack, or, whatever that is. If they tell me they work with government, I'm like, oh, compliance must be very challenging, right? It's a blanket statement that's true. Nearly anything you do in any kind of government, that's a thing, that's a pain. So we cover those things. What I really try to do is give them advice that I think is going to be actionable within our interaction, even if it's a 3-5 minute interaction. Maybe I tell him about a tool he should check out, or a company he should check out. Maybe it's like, hey, have your dev team gone through AI power training? 90% of the answer is no. I'm like, you should totally do it. It costs $5-10 grand. I can send you an email if somebody can do it, for example. So just give them something new to think about. And if I really have time, I'm probably going to ideate something. I'm probably going to give them an idea for a feature, a capability, a change, an area of the business he's probably should be de-risking and not thinking about it. So I try to build rapport by giving value, but I also do that by giving them a sense of, I understand what his business is about. And I've seen it before. Like, I can mention other companies or other projects or whatever it is. And this is the benefit of working with people like me, not necessarily me, that the real constraint is productivity and not leadership. So there's no reason to hire someone like me full time. And maybe that's the same also for his CFO, CMO, CRO. So somewhat of a long-winded answer, but that's usually what what ends up in that first. And everything I just said can really happen in like 3 to 5 minutes. Certainly, if you have 30 to 60 minutes, a lot can happen. You can probably get a meeting and close the deal. But you don't need that much time to learn about a company and establish a quick rapport by giving them value and giving them something insightful that they've never thought about.
Oh, yeah. And so, yeah, we are talking about just a few minutes here, but inside of those few minutes, through the active listening, through the reframing, through the nature of the questions you're asking, you're learning a ton about their business, and you're also demonstrating knowledge and awareness of their business, the challenges that they're solving uniquely inside of their industry and the stage and size of their business. And because I know you, your antennae are also looking for some other things and some filters to make sure that they are in your buy box. I'd love to know, we're going to go into objections handling and the other parts of the sales call, but even in these first 3 to 5 minutes, what are some of the things that you're looking for or listening for that would let you know, okay, there's something interesting here, or this is an interesting relationship worth developing? What are the things that you listen for?
Um, so first of all, I'm certainly looking for disqualifiers. So that's very much like attitude, perspective, stuff like that. I have a very adamant no asshole rule. But it's just not so no assholes. It's also like no vision. If I'm talking to someone, it's like, yeah, my business is like 5 million, 10 million, and I just want to keep it that way. Been like that forever. I'm like, great, that's amazing for them. I love that for them. Absolutely not my vibe. Because I want to be next to growth. I want to be next to growth mindset. Put aside the financial piece. Like this issue comes up with companies sometimes. I just met some guy. He has a company that's 180 million revenue, multi-generation, and they like their, 5-10% growth a year. You see it from his attitude. You see it from how he's thinking. I'm like, great, this is just not going to work out. It doesn't mean that I can't provide a lot of value. It doesn't mean that I absolutely cannot take the account. I can probably take the account if I just ask for it. But it's not where I want to grow as a person. And it's not the kind of relationship I want to have on a weekly basis. So I'm looking for mindset cues. Are they kind? Are they talking about frustrations? That everybody has frustrations. Are they talking about it in a negative, nasty way? Like, oh, those idiots, those assholes, they screwed me over. Like those kind of words. I'm like, hey, we don't need this attitude. It doesn't mean that they're not incompetent, right? They could very well be the case, and it could certainly be the case that they're not the right fit. But we don't need to use, bad language. So I'm looking for disqualifiers on attitude, on mindset, also on framing for finance. Sometimes we say in the program, we've seen $10,000 a month retainers signed with $1 million a year revenue companies. And we've seen companies that have 100, 150 million revenue negotiate our CTOs down to the bare bone, right? So it's not, a lot of people think, oh, it's revenue. That means they can't afford me. I'm like, no, affordability is a CEO mindset more than anything. It's an entrepreneur mindset more than anything, because entrepreneurs find a way and CEOs find a way. So I'm looking for all those cues to make sure that I would like to work with them, put aside if I can, if they need it, if it's interesting. Like all these are like secondary things because I'm curious. So the interest part is I'll probably find something interesting to do. So that's a big one. The second one is I'm looking for like obvious inefficiencies that I know I'm going to have low hanging fruit. Like I'm really trying to win in the first 30, 60, 90 days, like have a big win. Have a big win so much that they think they made the best decision, of the year. And that first month or quarter already feels like I give them value for the year's worth of retainer. So I'm looking for that. I'm looking like for the details that they're sharing and their state and how they're probably managing which has downstream implications. So I'll give you an example. One of my newer clients, before I started working with them, I asked them, what are you using? Now they've been running for a while, a few years, and they have technology, they have their own systems and a little development team and the whole thing. And I asked them what they use for like ticketing and, tasks. And it was nothing. Like no Jira, no ClickUp, no Asana, no nothing. I'm like, that's amazing, because the fact that they've done everything they did without any of these tools means that once you introduce proper tools and processes, velocity is like guaranteed, to increase. So this is an example of like a process low-hanging fruit. Same company, like consumer, never had a mobile app. I'm like, yeah, just a mobile app alone is a big deal, for a consumer company. So I'm looking for these kind of low-hanging fruit signals. And for me in particular, all of my deals at this point in my fractional CTO career have to have upside in them. So I'm trying to gauge and make sure that the impact that I can deliver and be a part of, like be associated with, is big enough. So when I ask for an upside, so like a 7-8 figure upside over a few years, then it makes sense. If I'm working with a company that's, 15 million in revenue, and let's say they're growing at 10%, but they have an opportunity to grow by 20% or 30%, and it's going to take a few years, and everything is very sluggish, and it's a slow industry, slow everything. I'm like, it's probably just a retainer client. I need to decide if I want it or not. Versus if I'm working with a company that has a lot of raw potential that they've never had a person that can kind of leverage all those materials and create new things, then it's basically a guarantee for me I can come up with an upside model. So I'm looking for mindset. I'm looking for low-hanging fruit. I'm looking for upside, like meaning the conditions of the company upside is relevant. If the company never wants to sell, again, multi-generational company doesn't mean to sell. Well, probably not a lot of upside. If it's I have another client that owns the company, doesn't really want to sell, opens maybe to do it, but he's okay with aggressive distributions. I'm like, great. So, we adjust for that, all those things. But if he wasn't, then it wouldn't be a client because I can't have upside even though I can have my retainer. So I'm looking for all of those. And once it's a green light, I basically try to make the conversation into some kind of a follow-up. And that follow-up usually entails me digging in a little bit more. And I try to provide value at any given point in time. Like once I learn about the company, I find myself, texting links to the CEO that I find and giving them random ideas and voice notes, just giving before we even get to the actual proposal stage.
That's great. And it's important to know, most of your clients come from trusted relationships. And we also coach CTOs through this process. And a big misconception that fractional CTOs who are new to selling have about the sales process is that it's like a salary negotiation in a job interview cycle. What's something that fractional CTOs miss about frame control as you've just described it?
The job context is very relevant because usually when you sell fractional CTO services, it's not driven by a resume. And on both sides, meaning they're not looking for a resume and you don't need to use one. And because you're mostly selling to a CEO that's normally non-technical, meaning they are not a CTO themselves, then the resume also doesn't mean much because they can't underwrite it. They can't understand the fact that, let's say you were director of a team in Amazon. You're probably managing 50 to 100 people. You're probably managing more people than the CEO is managing in the company as a whole, but it looks like a director on the resume. So it means nothing because they don't know what it means. It just have no context to any of these things. And let's say you did something super impressive, improved latency from 200 milliseconds to 10, which is wild, depending on the system you work in. It means nothing to the CEO. Like it's in zero context, right? They can't, and zero context in the industry and zero context to them as a company. So the resume is not a valuable tool. So we use other things. When people come to program, we work with them on presence. And presence is mainly how you show up. So it's how you show up on LinkedIn, how you show up on email, how you show up on a website, how you show up with your proposals, right? And so when you get Googled before and after, there's a sense of kind of superficial trust, and then you need to develop the deeper trust with conversations and actual interactions. And niche positioning is a big deal, right? So that's why we recommend, like, if you can, focus on a niche until you have a reputation instead of a fractional CTO for so-and-so. So if you, like on my LinkedIn, for example, I say a fractional CTO for $20 to $100 million revenue companies with big missions. I'm industry agnostic at this point because, exactly to your point, a lot of my deal flow can come from my network if I choose to. And doesn't mean that it's people I know are my clients, but my clients come from people I know, right? So I borrow their trust in a way, and they're recommending me, and also, of course, my clients recommend me, and so on. But I like multiple industries because of how I work and my upside models and all those things, but we certainly recommend people to focus on one because it streamlines everything. And part of what it streamlines is exactly that kind of trust, because if you work, let's say, in level 2, level 3 hospitals under 200 beds, and you work with 3 of them, the 4th hospital can hear, I work with 3 other hospitals just like you. And that's huge. And that sentence alone would drive more trust with your prospect than 20 years of line item resume. And certainly the next one is going to be like, call Mary, John, and Joseph and ask them about me, right? So referrals, testimonials, social trust, normally in the executive level, and that's true, period. It's not just fractional CTO. It's very much of a bona fides from people, one way or another. Even on big corporate, like if you look at Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies, and look at the C-suite, and you ask them how they got there, and the answer is most likely going to be like, I was an executive in a company that got acquired, and then the acquirer made me, a VP or a C-level, something, rather than kind of coming up the ladder. And the resume is a coming up the ladder type of strategy. That's why it's not useful. It's easier to understand with other professions, right? So when if you hire a construction company, if you manage a construction company and you hire, a project manager, you're going to look at the resume. Like, what other projects have you done? What have you managed? If I'm the homeowner hiring the home builder, I'm not looking at the resume, right? At best, I'm looking at their portfolio.
Show me the case studies. Show me the transformations. What did you do with yards like mine?
So it's more intuitive to understand this process as a consumer when you buy stuff like home services. When you call a plumber, is the plumber showing you their resume? No, you look at reviews, right? You look at how they show up. You look at how they answer the phone, right? You're looking for all these kind of trust signals that are about how they present themselves. That's what we call presence. And less about, show me the 200, similar drains you fixed, right? So very different. Like selling fractional CTO services is more like hiring a plumber from how trust is built rather than how a hire is getting acquired in the company.
Oh, yeah. So for those listening, I dare you to open up an incognito window or a private browser and Google yourself and your business and really take that fresh perspective. Does this secondary research set an appropriate foundation to position you for a really great first impression when you do have a conversation with somebody? It's really interesting, that note on social proof. I love the home services analogy. It's so appropriate. All right, so we talked about the first few minutes and how critical that is. And there's the pitch itself, which of course is going to be slightly different for everybody. And we've heard variations on it in previous episodes. But one of the big subjects we talk about in the accelerator in our convert training and in our sales gym sessions is objections handling, which is always such an important part of it. And I know when I started to learn sales, handling objections at first felt like, oh no, I need to defend myself. I need to anchor my value. But really, this is a gift because you get to understand the questions that your prospect is having and better understand how they think. I'd love to hear how you react and respond when a potential client raises objections or hesitates to bring you on as their fractional CTO?
There's a few ways to unpack this. And first of all, we recommend during your kind of pitch and relationship building process, you try to tackle those objections, before they even come up. Right? That means the way you present and how you talk. And so you're trying to pacify these things. You always have the big ones, time, money, spouse, partner, depending if it's consumer or B2B. Meaning spouse, partner need to ask, time, I don't have the time, money, I don't have the money. Those are big three. It doesn't matter what you buy. If you're buying groceries, car, yacht, house, services, that's just what it is. And then a lot of it goes down to relevancy. What I try in my conversations is really make sure that using that what in why conversation, that we're talking about a vision that's compelling. In a future that's compelling and exciting, because then their focus is on that, on I want to get there. And because I'm there in the process and we're talking about it and I'm giving them some advice and I'm expanding and ballooning their vision, it's natural for them to see me as part of that bigger and better future, right? So by the time we get to an objection, if it comes, I'm able to tie it back into that. And this is when discovery wasn't done correctly, you end up getting a rejection or an objection, which is going to be normally one of those things: time, money, partner. And then you have a challenge because you don't know what to tie it into, because you really want to tie it into the vision, right? Well, you said you wanted to do X, right? And this is how you do it. So there are some common ones. It's too expensive, and really expensive is just a frame of value for investments. That's all. The reality is fractional CTO retainers relative to full-time CTOs are a fantastic deal, right? So full-time CTO with like 20 plus years of experience is going to be $500,000 cash expense for the business. And in a fractional sense, with some industries, that could be a quarter of that investment. And it's an incredible return, right? So it's not an objective, it's not an objective affordability, because if they can't afford the CTO, they can certainly not afford the technology build, right? So if you think about the CTO as that like steward of the spend, right? That like somebody that knows how to spend, make sure that the spend is valid and accurate and valuable. You really want to, as a company, you really want to spend at least $500,000 a year, but most of them in that 1, 2, 3 million a year plus, and then spending another 150, 200 on making sure that $1 million or $5 million is spent correctly is no brainer, right? Because if it's misspent even by 10%, so 10% less efficient or 10% waste, that's $100,000 on $1 million. For every $1 million, that's $100,000, right? So it's not. So one is framing the ROI and understanding what it is. And I can do that once I figure out how much I spend on technology or what they want to build, or if we had that product, what revenue might, be there, or what risk might be removed, or what it's going to be, what's going to mean for the acquisition of the company. So once the too expensive coming in, it's really, first of all, understanding it's a value for investment and understanding it is an investment, and then go back and ask like, hey, what would need to happen for this to feel like a bargain for you? Because people want bargains. Right now, this is also back to the question earlier. I'm with my listening ears. Like, are they cheap in their mindset? Right. If they're cheap, I'm certainly not trying to convince them, because I don't want to work with you, because what's going to happen is I'm going to get the account. I'm going to convince. Been doing sales for a while. I can go through that particular rejection, but then I'm going to be in the job and I'm going to ask to hire, 2 engineers for like $20,000 a month. They're going to be like, no, I can't. So I can't do my job, right? So I need to make sure that they're not cheap, and it's really just a value framing thing, and then solving the value by tying it back to the vision and to the excitement. There's also, timing, and then I just ask like, what needs to be in place for the timing to be right? Like, is something going to happen? Are you okay with staying the way you are in the next 6 months? Or the next 9 months, next 12 months. So usually I start up. Are you okay with being in the same position 12 months from now? Usually there are no. Now I'm like, great. Are you okay with being in the same position 6 months from now? And usually there are no. I'm like, okay, you're okay with being 3 months from now? And then yes or no. I'm like, well, if you want to change by 3 months, we need to start now. So I'm compressing and kind of taking those walls down or closer, so they understand that if they want to achieve something relative to their vision, and everything costs time, and certainly if they were able to do it, they would have done it already, and we wouldn't even get to the point that we're talking about, hiring someone like me. So I really try to nail all those things down as a function of vision. So once I understand the vision, and then there's a particular rejection, then I just weave it in back to, well, you said that you wanted to get there within that time frame, because you have to introduce the time dimension to all these things. And then depending on what it is, I handle it. And there's quite a bit of objections we, teach in the accelerator as well.
Do you know what I love about that frame of are you okay if things stay the same in 12 months, 6 months, whatever the time frame is? It's a nice no-oriented question. We talk a lot about Chris Voss and his wonderful book, Never Split the Difference, Negotiate as if your life depended on it. And the power of no-oriented questions. And to paraphrase Chris's work, why are no-oriented questions so powerful?
Because no feels safe. No feels safe. And the best ways to phrase questions, so no is the positive, right? Would you mind if if I talk about so and so? No, I don't mind. Right. So no is the answer, but the net effect of the conversation or the question is positivity. So no feels safe, and yes is risky. Now, if you're talking to a high quick start, entrepreneur, and you kind of, meet those kind of like Labradors when you meet them, then just go for the yeses, right? You don't need to. But most people are not. Most people are not in that super high quick start. And even if they are, they probably also have like a Colby fact finder or something in there that's preventing them from just hitting gas on everything. So the safer one is just to ask an oriented question because it captures both sides, both personalities, the ones that are very excited and just want to go, go, go and say yes to everything, and the ones that are more hesitant, but you want to keep the conversation going. So no feels safe. Yes feels risky. And most of the time we're going to talk about new ideas, new propositions, new projects. So the yes is going to trigger that risk. And it's, if you speak French, that's easier for you because they have the double negative.
Right.
But otherwise, it's really useful to get like a quiver of questions you can pop up that are no-oriented questions.
So good. And then as it relates to objections and objections handling, what's an example in your client work and your prospecting work where you turned a no or a hesitation into a signed engagement?
So first of all, if you're trying to really build trust and kind of, I say on when I talk about sales that it's very much sales for this kind of work. It's more like falling in love. And that is to say you fall into trust. So with enough relationship, with enough conversation, the trust meter should go up with every conversation, every interaction. So by the time the ask comes in, we should also talk about that, then it's just they fall into a yes, right? As opposed to like pulling them into a yes or pushing them into a yes, right? Which more aggressive sales tactics would be more like that, like car sales, more common to that. I would say, as far as when those things happen, I just had this happen with a client. Like we've been talking since maybe October, November about the concept maybe coming in as a fractional CTO. And what I do with all the prospects, because I want to see if I like working with them, which means just talking to them. That's really what's working with them, right? We're not layering bricks together. So I usually offer a few conversations, a few Zoom, like, hey, let's just brainstorm. Let me talk to your team. Let me give you some advice, stuff like that. So I did that, like 2 or 3 meetings, and every meeting was like, wow, thank you so much. Great advice, great perspective. And it still didn't advance. And then what happened was I got an opportunity to speak, and they were in the room. And after that, like that evening, after they heard me speak, they just came and said, I just come in that was what sealed the deal. And that was pending. That was hovering for a while until that event happened, that I managed to get their full attention for an hour, plus a room full of other people reacting to it. That's why I built my trust directly, and I built my trust by proxy, which was enough to just say, do it. Another one, which was hovering for a while, and I realized their risk was, or their fear rather, was spend, right? Because my retainers are fairly high when I ask them. So I just told them, you know what? Not an issue. Let's do first 90 days, not going to cost you anything. But then after 90 days, you're going to pay me for 6 months. So you're going to pay me back for the first 3, and you're going to prepay for the next 3. And if you want to stop by day 89, in fact, by morning of day 90, it's done. You don't owe me anything, right? So I reduced the risk. I obviously increase risk on my end, but I have high confidence, that I can do it, that I can deliver. But at that point, it's like, listen, if you think I'm not going to do valuable work, don't worry about it. But if you think I'm doing valuable work, this is what you're going to pay. And so it's a win-win, and we de-risk the relationship with like basically payment terms, right? Which ended up being better than just, getting paid every month, because those first 3 months are more stressful, but then I'm actually covered, for the next 3 after. So in those 2 cases, one was just I needed to build more trust, and talk was the way to do it. after building some meetings with his team. And the second one was payment terms, like understanding, oh, the risk perceived is related to cash. It's not that they don't have the cash. They're just not sure it's going to be a good return. Like, great. I think it's going to be a great return because I collected the low-hanging fruit. I built enough rapport. Like, I already understand I'm going to do a good job, or I have enough trust in myself that I'm going to do a good job. And I know they have the money, so it's not like I'm risking it in a way that the company too small or they're going to, pull back on me or something like that. So that wasn't my fear in the engagement, but it is a valid fear. So yeah, in both cases, I realized one needed more trust, and that was the way to generate it, and the other one needed more confidence on financials, and I just proposed a different engagement model.
Beautiful. Little hard now, easy later in practice. I love that. Now, we talk about asking questions, the what and why conversation. And you mentioned a few minutes ago that along the way, you'll make recommendations. Have you heard of this business? Have you checked out this tool? How do you balance asking questions with making those recommendations without kind of going over the line into prescribing prematurely?
First of all, I feel comfortable prescribing. So if I give advice, I stand behind my advice. And if I think something might be premature, then I say statements like, well, I don't know everything about the situation or about the team, but this is something worth looking at. Like based on what you're telling me, they're probably not doing X, Y, and Z, right? Or you haven't considered A, B, and C. And I think confidence is very important. Like confidence is part of the sales process and is also part of the practice. Trusting your advice and always having the internal caveat and external if you need it, to the best of my knowledge and with my best intention, this is the advice, right? So I think everybody should feel, if they can say yes to those statements, right, to the best of my knowledge and to the best of my intention, I feel very comfortable giving advice, and I don't. When I had this thing with a client a couple of years ago, which was a prospect at the time, and they were sharing some of their difficulties in development, and I was kind of flagging it to him. I was saying, well, here's what I'm hearing. So we've been talking over a few months, and he was kind of giving me updates every few months, and they haven't made any progress, any material progress, or not the ones that I want to make. And every time I hear, yep, they're finishing the features, they're about to launch version 1, we have 1,000 people using, and then 3 months after I hear the same thing. Yep, we're about to launch. And this went on and on for a few quarters, like 3-4 quarters. I told him, listen, I can tell you from experience, there's probably an issue. And because if you had the right process, you wouldn't have circled around this feature development. And then that number you told me, 1,000, would have already been like 2,000 or 5,000 or something like that. Like something would have changed. So I'm just kind of giving it to you and kind of making sure that you're aware that this is not how it's supposed to be. And that opened, the door, and eventually they did become a client. And sure enough, I was right. So it smelled like smoke, and it was a fire in that particular case. And I think the position, though, is, hey, based on my experience, X, Y, and Z, this is what I see. And it doesn't matter if you're wrong, because at the very least, you're giving them confidence and a way to think about it, and you're giving them new glasses to look through on the situation. And of course, the more experience you have, then the device is probably going to be on point, and then you're developing opportunities. So I think it is valuable to give advice. I'm not afraid of it. I wouldn't throttle it. I think that's the best way to build trust. And it is important to caveat it and not have hubris of kind of saying, I know what's best for you. I'm like, okay, giving the information you were telling me, then this is my opinion. And naturally, if they didn't give you a lot of information, it's with that caveat.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how sales is a transfer of certainty. It's the certainty that you have in your recommendations, in your advice, and your ability to follow through on the vision that you've co-created and the promises you've made. Let's talk about another powerful tool. We talk about assuming the sale. And what does that look like? What is that? And what does it look like in practice? And how can a fractional CTO do that without sounding pushy?
So assuming the sale is a tactic, that basically means if everything's going well, like they like the proposal, they say yes, 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 instead of just waiting for them to get back to you and give you the signed agreement or suggest a date, whatever, you just assume it already happened. And what would be the next step? The next step would be a kickoff call, right? And the next step would be sending an invoice to the billing department. So acting like that. And what acting like that means is, let's say you're in a meeting, you're in a pitch meeting, they love it. It's like, great, great, great. And now you finish the meeting and you send an email follow-up 2 days later and nobody's responding, crickets, right? What I recommend doing, instead of just that follow-up, just send a follow-up with, how about we do a kickoff on Monday, July 15th, right? Just suggest what you would do as if you just got paid. Because if you just got paid, that's exactly what you would do. You would schedule the kickoff call and ask, what's the best email to send for the invoice, for the kickoff invoice. So you're not waiting for them to say yes, they says, you're actually just assuming they said yes. And then you're acting and doing all the activities that you would have done if you got a hard yes, like an explicit yes.
I love doing this with a half-day workshop where it's like, I'm holding these 3 dates. Which of them works best? Then they commit to the date. There goes the invoice, and we're off to the races. As we close today, if you could give one piece of tactical advice for handling objections as a fractional CTO, what would it be?
Tying it into vision, for sure. And again, that means that you should do discovery, even if it's a 3-minute discovery. And ideally, you understand where they want to go and how much do they currently spend and something about their pain. Objection, like you have to assume that they want your service. That's why they're talking to you. And you have to assume you can be a part of their bigger vision because that's the context of the conversation, especially with technology, especially in this day and age. Tied into vision, I with my particular clients, I really fall in love with their missions, which is what make me, even choose the projects in the first place. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to fall in love with their clients and their visions and the whole thing. Certainly not when you're just starting, because you try to build up that cash confidence and that, stable of clients. But once that happens, I'm like excited. I'm like, dude, don't you see that we should do this? Like, that's my mindset. I'm like, I love you. I love the company. I love the mission. I love the customers. I really want to do this. So that's either explicit. I literally either just say that. But even if I don't say it, that's what I think. So when a rejection comes up, I look at it as like, how can I reframe this back to the vision and the creation so I get to create the impact as soon as I can? So I think if you're going to come to it with that mindset, you'll be able to ideate the right rejection handling. And with that, the best rejection handling involves them. So the best kind of questions that you can ask is say, what would make this ideal for you? Right? What would make this the best timing for you? What would make this the best result for you? So have them co-create the rejection handling. And don't just think this is going to be like they're saying a line and now you're saying a line. It is a dialogue. It's not 2 monologues. And if you come at it with that mindset and you try to solve it together, and your mindset should be, I want to solve it with you and for you. So let's solve it. If it's money, let's talk about money. If it's timing, let's talk about timing. But both of us want to do this third thing called this big vision, for your company. If you're coming in with that mindset and you're coming in with that attitude, I think you can handle pretty much any rejection that comes your way. Assuming that, like we said earlier, you want to work with the client. You want to work on that project.
Ooh, and always be the buyer could be a subject of an entirely different episode. Well, I'm so excited to hear. I always love hearing your reframes and how you build relationships with clients. I think it's a high integrity, high trust way to do business. and highly collaborative. And ultimately, that's the world that we're heading into. So I love hearing you break it down, and I'm excited to continue chatting with you. You talked about the confidence you have about the low-hanging fruit in tackling and really setting up the payment structures so that you've got a full quarter to deliver. And in our next episode, we're going to talk about the process you've built that we teach at CTOX Accelerator to do just that. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation. And thank you as always, Lior. That wraps up another episode of the CTOX podcast. We hope today's conversation gave you the tools and inspiration to advance your journey as a fractional CTO.
And don't forget, if you want more in-depth support or to connect with our community of fellow fractional CTOs, visit us at ctox.com.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the CTOX podcast.